Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning.
Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week we're going to get into a forgotten gem, 1991's Fisher King by Mr. Terry Gilliam.
Oh, hit me with those Dutch angles, baby, and let's dive in.
Oh, here we go.
All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palcher.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. We are trying to build this channel. You can find us on all the spaces and places that people find good media. We've got punishment reviews. We've got festivals. We've got what we're doing here right now, which is a what, Palcher?
A forgotten gem?
Okay, watch it come down. Da, 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 da. There you go. Yes. Now, this is one of those interesting ones where it dovetails perfectly between a forgotten gem and actually our last festival, which was the Director Revenge Festival, because we're talking today about Mr. Terry Gilliam.
Yeah, obviously, known for Monty Python for most of his career. I think this is actually one of the only movies he doesn't have a Monty Python character in.
It was definitely the first. It was the first movie that he had done that did not have a Monty Python, which you think about it and you go, God, that's such a massive shadow to try and step out from underneath. Now, of course, all that being said, it is another Holy Grail film, so take that with a grain of salt, right?
That's a good point. I hadn't put that together. I don't know if revenge is exactly the right word. I think it's just this is probably Gilliam's one of his more accessible movies.
Accessible is the word, definitely.
I would say 12 Monkeys is up there as well,
but
for accessibility. But if you think of the stuff he did before this, the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, Time Bandits. Even Brazil, all of these are pretty culty films. Like, there's not a big following
here. Well, and Brazil, I mean, barely got released because it was so long and so weird. And, like, there was, if you want to go down the rabbit hole of what happened early on in Gilliam's career when it comes to Brazil, my God, just read the Wikipedia. Like, there are so many things that happened of, like, people talk about Blade Runner as being like, there's so many cuts of it. Like, no. Brazil. There's like 15 different versions of Brazil. And I love that one of the early moments in the Fisher King, when we're at the video store, there is a huge poster. There is a huge poster of Brazil when we very first see the video store.
He's not ashamed.
No, he's not ashamed. No, it's great. I love it. But you're absolutely right. This culty thing, then for him to try and be like, okay, I'm not going to write this thing. I'm just going to direct it. But my God, he was born to direct this movie.
Oh, no doubt. And that's the thing is, like, all those weird elements that he has from those past movies are still in this movie. I just think it's way less obscure, even though I guess it does get pretty obscure at some points. There's a lot going on here. First thing I want to say right off the bat, and this is just a personal thing, but the TriStar intro to the movie, it gave me like childhood flashbacks watching this movie. I don't know if I've seen...
right there with you. Oh.
For some reason, when I watch this, I don't know if I've seen Iron Eagle and Short Circuit way too many times.
No.
But for some reason,
that Pegasus going over the T. Oh my God, I got chills. I love it. I feel like that it was even grainy and retro looking the very first movie that they did it with. Like, it's always looked that way. No, I totally agree.
So Gilliam has 3 rules of life when it comes to when it came to filmmaking. He'd never do anyone's script but his own. He'd never work for a major studio, and he'd never work in America. And he broke all 3 of those rules with this movie.
Isn't that just the saddest one guy version of Dogma 95? Isn't that just like what that is? It's like,
I'm gonna do this by myself.
I'm a filmmaker and I have rules, right? Like, and you're like, you're gonna blow past those in a minute.
But for the most part, he stuck to those rules. If you look at everything before Fisher King, so kind of interesting. This movie was written by Richard LaGravenese. I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
He's done his filmography
is weird.
All over
I
the
looked
place.
at this too. It's very strange.
He did Tim Heidecker's The Comedian.
Yeah.
He did a sports movie, Unbroken, Behind the Candelabra with Matt Damon and Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
Water for Elephants. P.S. I Love You. So we're getting into romantic comedies. And he wrote Bridges of Madison County.
I think he's just a dude who likes to write screenplays.
Yeah, good for him.
But I think that this
what a weird
Fisher King's like one of his that's his first big ones.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that comes back to the writer who just sounds like he's a really good writer and he knew how to structure a story and all that stuff. I agree with you. Probably in my younger years of film fandom, I probably would have gone like a Brazil or a 12 Monkeys, like you're saying.
Same here.
And I always like Fisher King, but it's one of those that the more you watch it, there's so much going on.
It's so good.
And there's lots of layers, and it's just really good. You have these incredible performances by Jeff Bridges, Robin Williams, Mercedes Ruehl, and Amanda Plummer, like you mentioned already. We get into Jack Lucas, the Jeff Bridges character here, right?
The shock-jock.
And he's this he's like a shock-jock kind of Howard Stern-esque kind of guy, right? And he doesn't realize the power of words, I think, probably. And his kind of cavalier attitude ends up having tragic effects on a lot of people's lives. And one of his listeners goes to Babbitt's, I think is what it's called.
Yes, Babbitt's.
And shoot all the yuppies. He calls it yuppie inbreeding. It says they don't feel love, but they just feel love moments.
Yeah. They negotiate love moments. Well, this character Edwin, who is really like the original incel, right? I mean, he is like this guy, this poor schmuck, this idiot who calls in every night, and they're all like, "Oh, it's Edwin. We haven't heard from you in 9 hours." And what's amazing here is that the name of the movie is The Fisher King, and later Perry, Robin Williams' character, tells the legend of the Fisher King. And part of the legend of the Fisher King is this young boy who sees greatness, sees the grail in the fire, and then is overcome by greed and overcome by his own desires and wants and lusts, and basically becomes toxic to himself, right? And cannot find greatness even within himself because he is so immersed with just this like negative toxicity about the world around him and greed.
He's a pretty repugnant guy, right? Like, he's got metal-tipped cowboy boots, and he just thinks he's better than everyone. He thinks he is, anyways.
Well, he thinks his voice spins gold, right? He's like, I'm going to say these things, and
he's untouchable. Well, we have the forgive me scene in the bathtub where he's practicing for this new sitcom, right? Which comes back around and is a great moment. But the way that he's portraying himself in that forgive me scene versus what the forgive me scene ends up being when Harry Shearer does it on TV.
Yep.
It's very, it's just kind of shows you how Jack views himself, right?
Can we stick on that for just a second too? Because watching it this time, and first of all, can I just say, you came up with this suggestion of doing the Fisher King, and I cannot thank you enough, because it had probably been a decade since I'd watched this movie, and
yeah, we talked about it on the podcast years ago.
And in watching it this time, sometimes, man, you gotta go back and revisit these movies to realize how damn important they are to you. And that they are like these building blocks of your own personal psyche and empathy and understanding of the world. And Fisher King's one of mine. Definitely is. And it'd been too long since I'd been back there. But what I really realized this time when watching it is the sitcom idea is great. This forgive me thing is so funny. Seeing him trying it out, can't get it right. Then later, after the bottom falls out of his life, seeing Harry Shearer do it, and doing the forgive me thing, and then people saying, "Oh, I love when he does that. It's so funny." All of that's amazing, but the secondary, or I guess third level, is that it's all that Jack Lucas needs in his life is to actually know how to say the line, "Forgive me." It's what the rest of this movie's about. The rest of this movie is about him needing to say that to Perry, and he can't.
Interesting. Yeah,
it takes him so fucking long to learn how to say it.
Yeah, and that's what he needs. He needs to forgive himself, and he needs to, embrace Perry, of course, and all this,
and ask for forgiveness.
Forgive him for who he is.
Ask the fucking universe 100%. For forgiveness, and he can't do it. And that's how we learn about him in this opening scene. Is he's not good at it. And I love that. Like, there's so many layers of that. There's a Pinocchio reference thing that washes up, I don't know, 10 times throughout this movie. That starts in the very first scene that we meet him. He talks about the story of Pinocchio. Like, I love this. It's just, there's these echoes.
Yeah, and that happens throughout the movie, through so many little details, from the Red Knight to a variety of things.
Yes.
I love... This movie is such a snapshot of the 90s, too. I think another fun part of this. After this fatal incident, we jump like 3 years ahead. You made a point last week in our Before the Devil Knows You're Dead review of how we get this like 10 minutes before tragedy strikes of someone's life, and then the rest of the movie is us figuring out how it's unraveled and what happened in between, and what they need, or if they just need to move forward and move on. And we have him and his girlfriend Anne, who's Mercedes Ruehl, who I believe she won an Academy
Award. She did,
for this.
and I would say she is the best part of this movie. As much as I love Robin Williams, in my opinion, Mercedes Ruehl is the best part of this film.
I have a very strong opinion about this, and if when we reviewed this the first time, this wasn't my take, I almost feel like it was. But not only is she the best part of this movie, she's the only reason this movie exists, right? She is the glue that holds this whole movie together.
If she wasn't there, none of the parts work. None of the parts work.
Nope.
Yep.
And it's her personality, how she plays the part.
Oh,
if this was a different actress, if this was a different actress, I don't think it would have been as effective as how she does it here. She's just the best, and I'm sorry, I still have a huge crush on Mercedes Ruehl. She's amazing.
She's sexy as hell in this movie, dude. She is like, in those scenes where Robin Williams is like, "Oops, I dropped my fork," and he's looking down to look up her dress. I'm like, "You're a scoundrel."
Not even hiding it.
I get it. To a degree, I get what you're saying. I understand why you're doing that, dude.
But we also get Jack in a very, down part of his life. He lives with her above this video store that she owns and runs. I love that we're in a video store. It's great. And I love that there's a porno section. He comes down and tries to help someone, and you get it from like the you get it kind of the POV perspective of like an altered mind. And
it's that fisheye lens thing that Terry Gilliam's so good at, right? Where it's like, woo.
She says, "I'm looking for something zany." And he says, "Why do you try ordinary peepholes? Dude, it's a big tittied spread cheeky kind of thing."
And I knew that.
I love that line.
I knew that all of those jokes. Do you know the other one? I knew the one that was going to get you big time. When the other guy comes into they're trying to have like a personal talk, but he's like, "Shh, somebody wants to come in and look at the pornos." She's like, let him in. And he comes in and they're trying to have a serious talk, but the guy's just browsing. And she's like, "What are you looking for? A story? What are you looking for?" He's like, "I don't know yet." And she grabs one. And do you remember what she says? She says,
I can't remember.
"Creamer versus Creamer. It won an award."
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
And I thought to myself,
I wrote that
one
down.
Oh, God, that's Palcher through and through.
Creamer.
Like, the fact that this movie can deal with homelessness, mental illness, the idea of redemption and forgiveness and the belief in God, and all these huge ideas, and still have room for porno jokes. porno rental movie name jokes. Like
Genius.
It's dancing this line that like
and that's
a
why
lot
it's
of
his
movies
most
don't just see a lot of movies like that do that, right?
That's why it's his most accessible movie, because there is that balance of tragedy and comedy.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's probably something that Robin Williams ended up being really famous for, even to the degree of Patch Adams or something like that.
Yeah, and and he got kind of clowned for later in his career, like before he kind of rebooted himself with things like 1 Hour Photo. There was a moment where it was like, oh, comedy tragedy, get Robin Williams. Which now, I mean, my God, again, 2 movies in a row. Oof, 2 movies in a row with dudes that need to still be here. Ouch.
Philip Seymour Hoffman last week,
yes.
and Robin Williams this week.
But
we'll just say they both are in Patch Adams.
That is true. They're both in Patch fucking Adams. Damn it.
and so don't watch that one.
No, don't watch that. I mean, go watch Jack instead with Robin Williams and fucking Bill Cosby. Isn't Bill Cosby in that?
Oh, that's right. Bill Cosby is in that one. Yes.
Sorry.
But back to this movie, Jack Lucas at this point he's just such a mess, right? He's falling around. He's kind of a wastoid. He kind of wants to kill himself.
And he gets a Pinocchio. He gets a Pinocchio doll. And this conversation with the Pinocchio doll about Nietzsche with the bungled and the botched. And the bungled and the botched comes back later, which I love the way that it comes back later. But this circular dreamlike logic where he's like, you're a good kid, you say no to drugs. Jeff Bridges can play stoned and drunk like nobody's business. And I said this to Abby. Is it just me? And I realize it's 1991. Does he have like a super sexy Eddie Vedder thing going on in this movie? With that hair?
I don't know. He's got the ponytail.
It's pretty Eddie Vedder, man. It's pretty Pearl Jam.
I guess a little bit. I see him as a little older than Eddie Vedder.
I mean, definitely, but it's like just
time,
the hair and the top
trying
ponytail.
To be hip. Yeah.
Like it's very. Sure. I was like, damn, he looks good. He looks good here.
So let's get to these Dutch angles that you talked about in the intro here, because this is such a huge trademark for him. He does it in all of his movies, every single one that I can think of. He's done it, and it's all over the place here. But it's super effective because not only is that kind of his trademark angle, but it's even like street shots it's in, and it really skews and kind of warps the world we're living in almost, and it's always looking up, right? It's rarely looking down. It's always looking up.
Yes, it's always looking up. And I realize that Gilliam is influenced so heavily by a lot of English directors and Danish directors, and a lot of them were like sort of surrealistic stuff that was happening in the 70s and into the early 80s. But he's the one who kind of let it bubble to the surface and turned it into a mainstay. And he has been ripped off and imitated so many damn times by so many directors since. Like every director that ever wanted to be like, it's a druggy scene or it's a weird scene. Like, I'm sorry, but like Oliver Stone, I'm looking at you. Like Oliver Stone in the 90s, dude, you got to give at least some royalties back to Terry Gilliam, because like how many like fisheye lens shit and like Dutch angles and like the camera's on the ground and it lifts up to this weird scene. Like that's Gilliam. You took it from Gilliam. I'm sorry, but you did. Like the dude was doing this stuff and to his own not necessarily discredit, but like he was doing it and his movies weren't doing great until Fisher King. Like Fisher King was really, I think, to a large modern audience, the first time that, other than maybe Monty Python, that they were like, oh, okay, I see what this dude is doing.
Yeah, he's an artistic guy. He likes to get weird. I think that's why a lot of his movies are those cult movies we're talking about. I think part of what makes this movie so accessible is it touches on a little bit of what you're talking about. Homelessness and mental health and that kind of stuff is definitely in here. But I think this is secretly, maybe it's not a secret, but this movie's about class warfare more than anything.
Oh,
is what stuck out with
completely.
me. Like you have homeless bums throughout this movie invading the world of the rich white man, and at a point a child even thinks he's a bum.
Totally.
And that's how far he's fallen, right?
Well, and then it's
they
this
pour gasoline on him.
really fine line, right? Like that basically he has a place to stay. A couple years before, 3 years before, he was like in stretched limos, and that quickly he can just like get drunk, walk around, and then be like, "Oh, these guys are gonna light him on fire," right?
Yeah.
Like these dudes, these stupid kids who show up a couple
Frat
of
bros.
times.
Yeah.
These sweet bros are gonna light him on fire, and that's when Perry comes to his rescue in just a fantastic scene in this movie when he shows up.
Absolutely, Robin Williams' performance here is I think pretty underrated. I don't think people talk about this one very much, but he really leans into what he's good at, right?
Yes.
He's
Yes.
good at acting crazy and being real, and having like just very. He can be weird, but also be very real at the same time.
Yeah, and he's playing this diligent knight. He thinks he's a knight from like Arthurian like round table knight, and at the same time he also still gets in his Robin Williams jabs that in no way betray the character. This isn't Aladdin where he's trying to do 100 things.
Yeah, where he's just riffing. Yeah, that's super important. I totally agree, because it's not him. He's doing what the script says. He's not doing what Robin Williams thinks
He's just punching it up in the way that only Robin Williams can, where it's doing something like being like, "Oh, I know, men with men," right? Like that fits in with the character, but it's also Robin Williams' strength, right? To be able to do both simultaneously. And this is one of his best films. I put this up right next to Good Will Hunting as like
He's the janitor of God.
He's a janitor of God. And he is in these moments where he needs to be pious and perfectly serious, he switches it. And actually that ability to switch between physical comedy and dead seriousness is, I think that is one of the things that made Robin Williams such an amazing actor. And I can't remember what movie it was or who the other actor was, but there was a great story, and this was not long after his death, that an actor was talking about working with him, and that Robin Williams, he seems like kind of like pudgy little guy, and like he runs around and he's funny and goofy, and that there was a scene, and very hairy. Listen,
you could barely see his penis.
Oh,
in this
listen,
thing
I'm sewn from the same cloth, my friend.
Yes, you are, sir.
Very much so. So I relate hugely to Mr. Williams. But this actor said, except for the head, but this actor said that they were doing a scene together, and like even though he's like little and pudgy, when it was a dramatic scene, and the other actor had to push Robin Williams, and when he pushed against him, he was like, I pushed against his chest, and he's like, it was pure muscle. It was like pushing against a wall. He's like, and it's because like, even though he seems all silly and funny, like his core, he's intense as
person.
Fuck, right? Like everything down in there, he is like, that is who he is. And this movie, I think, embodies that about his personality, maybe more than anything else, where he's funny and he's flighty and he's talking about little fat people flying around. But then the very next moment he says, I'm sent from God. And he is serious as a heart attack. And the fact that his character has this mental illness that is switching back and forth between these different personalities and different visions and realities, right?
No doubt. Yeah, the Red Knight is definitely part of his psyche, like that's on fire. And we find out the tragic event that connects these guys is that his wife was in Babbitt's the night that the guy who listened to Jack came and shot up the place, and she died, and that's why he's at the place that he is. And when you see a homeless person on the street or on the corner asking for change, you don't think about like what happened to them to have it get there.
What
right?
got there?
And generally you think it's probably like a selfish thing, right? Like they weren't responsible or were bad with money or got into drugs,
which
or
is
whatever
where
it may be.
Jeff Bridges' character and a lot of the people around him are at before he kind of takes this fall, right?
I agree, but it's Anne's perspective that saves the movie. Again, she is us, right? And she has this great philosophy of like, you know, the God and the devil should just get together and work it out, right? Like, just
they gotta get together and work it out. Well, and I feel like I absolutely love that, and I love that because of his guilt, Bridges' character, and again, like so much acting here, or so much of the drama needs to hinge on Jeff Bridges. Who again, an incredible actor, but we think a lot of times as being more of like a funny actor or affecting some kind of a concept to his character, whether you're talking about Big Lebowski or even something like The
Contender, where he's the president.
The Contender, like that, yeah. Or I'm thinking Starman, of course, where it's like these big kind of bombastic things. But instead here, so much of the movie, we zoom into his eyes as he's having a realization. When he realizes that he sent Edwin in to kill all those yuppies, and we zoom in on his eyes, and he just goes, fuck, right? Like, that is such a heavy moment. And then later, after he's met Perry and Perry saved him, and then we find out Perry was in that restaurant, and we zoom in on his face and the sweat and those eyes, and so much of the movie like hinges on us realizing this is another moment for Jack to realize this thing. But Jack's a shitty guy, and I love that about him. He's totally self-centered. He keeps saying, "Why does this keep happening to me?" Right? And it's like, nothing happened to you. Other people lost their wives and husbands. Nothing happened to you.
I love the part because this again shows the balance there, where he's up there. It's like, why is this happening to me? And Robin Williams, Perry comes over. He's like, who are you talking to, Jack?
Yeah,
like he's like crazy.
Yeah,
it was classic.
I'm talking to the little people, and he's like, they're here. That doesn't sound like them. All of that is so good.
So we get to the crazy house, right? And that's where we meet Michael Jeter, who's the homeless cabaret singer, and is amazing.
I love Michael Jeter, and I love the other thing. I love Green Mile. I love other things he's done.
Green Mile, yep.
But the scenes he's in this movie,
he steals the scenes.
Oh my God, so good, and actually not just humor wise, but
emotionally,
dude,
absolutely.
This
He's
scene,
holding him like a baby.
Well, and he says this thing. He's like, he's holding him like a baby, and it's this really funny. There's so much funny stuff here where he's like, I want to be run over by a debutante, right? And he's like, there's no more debutantes left. And then they get into this whole like back and forth about who is and who isn't today a debutante, which is amazing. But then when they're sitting there and he's like, well, you know, I did show tunes, you know, every night and da-da-da. And he's like, plus I've seen all my friends die. And it becomes this really tender, very realistic. I mean, you know, to be able to, he hit the nail on the head without having to say anything about the AIDS crisis. It's 1991. And without having to say anything about the AIDS epidemic, just kind of say it. And that becomes a moment where Jack is like protective of him, where he even lays his head back a little bit. He's like, I sound like a veteran, don't I? And the guy's like, oh, and he's like, hey, watch it. And he's protective of him. And it's like, it's a very beautiful, tender little scene, but boy, it is. And Jeter's voice, that high-pitched falsetto just cuts through every other bit of dialogue.
Gilliam makes Grand Central Station almost seem like a crazy house, right? He makes it seem like
completely.
an insane asylum with all the people begging for money and whatever.
Well,
and
I
people
don't
getting coins thrown in their coffee.
Yeah, he picks it out of his coffee. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Gilliam was a massive fan of Tom Waits. And basically,
of course. How can you not be?
Well, and of course Terry Gilliam is. I mean, if you listen to Swordfish Trombone, you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a Terry Gilliam movie.
I love the concept of Waits here, though, right? Because what's he call himself? The moral traffic light.
He's the moral traffic light, and
where people have to, they're paying so they don't have to look, right? They're paying so.
Here's the other part of the movie that was not written by that screenwriter. Terry Gilliam went to Tom Waits and said, "I'm going to give you like a minute and a half in my movie. Here's your character. Say whatever you want." That whole monologue was written by Waits. Script?
Oh, wow. Wow. So it was scripted, just not by the script.
No, it was scripted by Tom Waits. Hey, Bob, why don't you come on in here and kiss my ass for a little while, right? And you go, oh my God, this. If you think about things like Jack's Wild Years or a lot of these other spoken word pieces that Tom Waits has done over the years, you're like, of course that makes sense. Of course that's what he did. So yeah, that whole beep, 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 that whole thing is all Tom Waits.
That doesn't surprise me, but I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
That's really
Isn't
great.
that great?
I love that. Part of the reason we're in Grand Central Station is because Perry's fallen in love with Amanda Plummer.
Yes.
And I just love what an endearing mess this girl is. Like,
I love that she's difficult. She's fucking difficult.
It's perfect casting.
Yes.
Right? Like,
oh my
I think
God.
people mostly know her from the opening and ending scenes in Pulp Fiction.
Of course.
Probably.
Honey Bunny. Yes.
But I think she's not utilized enough. And this is such a different role for her, and we really get to know her pretty well. And I agree, like, she's very particular and has very certain things, and he knows them all.
Yeah. There is only, I don't know if you know this, there's only one scene that Gilliam changed, and he was super worried about changing. Do you know this?
Huh. I don't think so.
So, it's supposed to go to this subway scene where a homeless woman does this amazing operatic song, and everyone is spellbound and turns and looks. And he tried filming it, and it didn't work. And so he was like, how do I make this thing work, right? And so he was like, I had this idea that I could switch it to Grand Central Station and do this dance number. And he's like, and I was terrified to do it because I thought that would turn it into a Terry Gilliam film. And he's like, and I was trying to go so against type and do something different. And I was like, that's the moment where you thought you were going against type? Like, this is a Gilliam film start to finish. Your fingerprints are all over this thing, dude.
No doubt.
The slow dance ballroom scene in Grand Central Station is one of the greatest moments of this film. So the fact that he was worried about that and that would make it seem too whimsy and like that he was putting too much of his stamp on it, I was like, what a weird thought that, like, that's where he was in his head, where I'm like, dude, this is one of whatever. I'm just going to throw it out right now. To me, this is Terry Gilliam's best film. And I love 12 Monkeys. I love Time Bandits. I love how weird he can be. I love that he was a part of Monty Python. I love all of that.
Life of Brian. Yep.
I love all of that. But this movie to me is why Terry Gilliam is a director and why he makes movies, is because of this film. Like, and I give a lot of that to the screenplay.
It's a surreal moment in the movie, you know, and there's a handful of those in this movie, but this one was really effective, I thought, and just kind of a beautiful little moment.
Glorious.
Of them.
It's just gorgeous. Yeah. She is perfectly cast here. Yes. And I agree, she's very against type, usually. And Abby at one point said, you know, I remember watching Sound of Music as a kid, and she was like, I had the biggest crush on Christopher Plummer. And she's like, and somehow the child of his loins is one of the most unattractive women of all time. And I was like, it's fair. I don't know that I would necessarily say that, but that was my wife. And But I understand where she's coming from. And Amanda Plummer usually plays like crazy pants people. And here, like, granted, she's a little particular. She's kind of crazy, but she is so lovely. Like, once you actually get to know her, in the beginning, she's a pain in the ass. By the end of this movie, you just want to fold her up and put her adorable. In your pocket. Yeah. Like,
the way she eats dumplings.
Oh my God. Stuff. Well, and just that whole, like, are you my girl? Like, thing at the end, like, whoo, totally got me teary-eyed. Anyway, I'm jumping around again, but we understand that Perry is living in this duality. He's living in this liminal state of unreality where he believes he's a knight. He believes Jack is a knight. He believes that they need to get the Holy Grail. And really,
he heal the hearts of men, right?
To heal the hearts of men. And at the same time, he also believes in the legend of the Fisher King, which is a greedy king whose heart is in the right place, but is blinded by greed. And it isn't until a peasant comes and sees that the king is thirsty and gives him the cup. And obviously in this parable, we know that the peasant is supposed to be Perry. The king is supposed to be Jack. The Jack is thirsty, doesn't even know that he is, right? Like, there's all of these layers in here. But beyond everything else, the biggest player is the Red Knight. The Red Knight who is keeping Perry from being able to get the Holy Grail, right? And this is, you want to talk about Gilliam imagery. This massive 12-foot tall red medieval knight with a fire-breathing horse, banners flapping, running through fucking Central Park.
It's so eccentric, yeah.
Dude, this is Gilliam. You take that shit, you cork it, and you save it for a rainy day. It isn't getting any better than this. Smoke billowing, the trees parting, the horse galloping right down the middle of like Fifth Avenue. It is beautiful imagery. It is so potent and powerful. And to me, I'll just say this. I know I said best Gilliam film. He was made for this movie because this movie requires a psychedelic double vision. One of which is modern New York that's covered in filth and lunacy and almost like circus-like and just like the homelessness and all this. And then laid on top of it, clicking directly into place, is a fantastic gothic mythology where there's room for zany sound effects when he shoots his arrows.
And the castle.
And the castle and great depraved humor, very Monty Python-esque, as well as swooning romance, spellbinding moments, and a real message that has to do with like destiny and love and faith and forgiveness and friendship and all of these like layers, right? And you just go, yeah, in a way, Gilliam kind of had to get out of his own way with shit like Brazil and Time Bandits and do someone else's movie where he could add all that stuff into a story that wouldn't get muddled by his own weirdness. Like, he's weird enough to just like inject himself, but the story needs to be the story.
I love that. That's a great way to frame how he affects this movie and how important that is. This movie wouldn't be the same if it was someone else. I think that's a great analysis of him as a director and what it took for him to become accessible.
Yeah, he just had to get out of his own way.
Interesting. That's really interesting. You're right. He's weird enough to be able to go on to inject his weirdness without any hitch of anything else. You know, that story of the Fisher King where he's really explaining it to Jeff Bridges. You can tell what a great teacher Perry was, right?
I know, it makes it so sad. Especially when he's like, oh, I heard that story somewhere, maybe a seminar, and then he loses the thread. Oh, God, it breaks your fucking heart.
And he ultimately says, a woman who loves you keeps you going, gives you strength, which, again, hits on Jack, wake up. Mercedes Ruehl is right there. You have people around you.
That's my only complaint. My only complaint of this movie is she leaves the story for everything to happen in the third act, and she's only there for him to come back and say that he loves her. And when we see her again, we're hungry for her, and we're like, that's it? I want more of her. I realize that she's not the main character here, but...
I just don't know where we are if she's not there.
Exactly. She's our compass.
And when she's not there, that's when he goes back to his old life, right? And kind of accepts everything and calls his agent and tries to start something new and do all this. And I just don't know if we're not there, especially in these scenes where they're going on the double date. Like the double date sequence where he's shuffling through the cuteness between Robin Williams and Amanda Plummer and them laughing and just eating dinner in this dumpling place. And there's like a slide transition, and we just see just like multiple takes of this random stuff happening as they're dinner.
I love
it's
that
the best
transition.
part of the movie.
I love that transition. Yeah.
It's the best part of the movie. It's so like, I don't know. It's just the most endearing part anyways. And he also has this perspective, and I'm talking about Perry here. You know, he is in love again, finally, after this long 3 years of his wife, and him becoming a bum and living in the trash. And, you know, she has these perceptions. She's an introvert a bit, and she's weird. You know, winning makes her uncomfortable, and that's how they got her reeled in there.
She's like, who else was in the room when they picked my name out? And he's like, just me. Just me. I was in the room. It's not a big deal. Like...
But he gives her this little chair made of trash, right? And like,
beautiful
hey, it can
things
be
in the
beautiful
trash.
sometimes.
Oh my God.
Anyways, it's a romantic movie, and I never really had thought of it like that, you know?
It's a very romantic movie. Well, and I think that Robin Williams' character, like the way he talks about romance and the way that he talks about women and his heart and like how to keep beauty alive and like why even stay living? Like, what's the purpose of it, right?
But he also throws in, I have a heart on the size of Florida. Right?
I love that. Well, in that moment, I mean, he tosses it all on the table and he's like, I know you. And that could be, and we don't know, like, is this going to end up creepy or not? And it is kind of a beautifully creepy romantic scene, but she's a weirdo too. So it all pays off where she likes the fact that he's a kind of a creepo and knows all this about her. Like, you see it in her eyes. Like, it's so deftly directed where you're like, all of this is happening at the exact same moment where he is finally laying all his cards on the table. And if she was any less a weirdo, this is all going to go south. But she's as weird as she is, so this totally works.
There's a reason that it works, right? Because they're both in that part, and you know that goes on to the end of the movie, and where she's with him on the side of his bed and all that stuff. But you know,
are you my girl? That whole thing again got me crying, dude. Woof.
The movie's not afraid to get weird, and it looks epic as hell. I also think there's very low limits for what men are in this movie, right? Like, you made coffee and you're working?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Listen, it's either you may have been responsible for a multiple homicide or you're homeless. Like, as a man, we're doing just fine. Last thing I'm going to say, other than the fact that this movie is one of my absolute favorites, is
excellent.
2 words, Kaoru Betu. He is a Japanese baseball player, power hitter, Japanese baseball player, who appears in Jeff Bridges' t-shirt. The first time you're going to see that is in the 1989 movie Cold Feet, where Jeff Bridges plays a bartender. The second movie is here, where we see this exact same t-shirt. So second movie is in this movie. The third movie is in The Big Lebowski. It is a Jeff Bridges meme that he wore his own shirt for his own personal reasons having to do with these 3 characters. The first one being the bartender in Cold Feet. The second one being the Jack Lucas character in Fisher King. The third one being the dude in The Big Lebowski. That these shirts make an appearance in all three movies. It's legend that this is the second of the 3 Kaoru Betu t-shirt movies. I don't know what it means. Jeff Bridges won't explain it. It just means something to him.
Last few things I'll say. The TV about homelessness, they're wacky and wise. And it's just so bad and obvious now. Like, they love being homeless.
They're home free. Well, and you know who that actor is that's pitching it? That's Q from Star Trek.
That's right.
Yeah. And I love that is the moment where he's like, what the fuck? I got to get out of here.
Yeah. And then we obviously have this super emotional scene at the end where he visits him in the hospital and like the I'm not God speech and people survive. It's easy being nuts. Try being me. That's the point where he finally says, forgive me, right? He says he's not special. And the guilt trip of, after his success and what happens to Perry. Amazing movie. I agree with you.
Also, right before that, once he gets his show back, that's where the tagline from Nietzsche comes back and he says, from one bungled to all the botched. And you go, okay, he's learning. He's not there yet. Yeah, he needs to get the Grail, but he's learning.
For sure.
Absolutely brilliant.
I love also that she dresses him in watermelons.
Dude, the fact that she's taken such good care of him just like brings tears to your eyes where it's like he is her prince, even though one kiss and then he's catatonic. She's bringing him sheets every week. A final thing I'll say.
Lovely movie.
I'm saying like 10 final things. Last thing. Yes. Come on. The best moment of the movie. Everything's coming up video for you, Lydia. Dude, that is the funniest. That is one of the most bizarre, fucking hilarious moments in any movie ever. Like, it is the weirdest, funniest moment where you're just like, what am I looking at? What is this? What's this scene in this movie? Where he's just like, if you like pornos, we're your connection. And he's like wagging his butt at her. Like, it is. Where else are you going to find that? Where else are you going to see that? It's amazing.
Not these days, for sure.
Yeah.
It is a snapshot in time. It's a forgotten gem for sure. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We're going to continue we're going to start a new festival next week with some type of documentary festival. We're still deciding what.
Yeah, you got some ideas in your brain. You're gonna come up with something good for us.
We'll figure out something. I'm very excited about that. So stay tuned. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, you guys.